Well now, are you settled? Welcome back to Celticism, where each week you'll hear Irish ghost stories whispered, slow, to guide you into rest. Just before we begin, one small thing. If these tales keep you company through the night, press like, tap subscribe, and in the morning, leave me a little comment to let me know how you slept. Now, here's the trick. You need to soften your eyes. Don't close them all the way. Just let them blur. Let the shadows drift into shapes of their own. The longer you try to stay awake, the quicker sleep will find you. Now, ease your brow. Let your jaw slacken. Let your shoulders fall. Breathe in slow, belly rising. And breathe out gentle, belly sinking. Arms heavy, legs heavy, the whole body quiet, wrapped in the stillness of the room. This is your place to come back to each night. Your fire, your dark corner, your safe bed. And tonight, our first story is called Companion, the tale of Larry Fitzpatrick, a man with a cottage full of jars, and a shadow that would not leave his side. Larry Fitzpatrick lived alone in a squat stone cottage at the far end of a bog track. He was a quiet man, and though neighbours saw him now and then, he kept to himself. Those who had stepped inside his home noticed shelves of glass jars in the back room, lined neatly from floor to ceiling. Larry never explained what he did with them, and no one pressed the matter. It began one night as he lay in his bed. In the corner of the room, deeper than the dark itself, crouched a shape, thin and gaunt, no taller than a man but stretched in strange angles. Its throat clicked slowly like stones struck together, and in the blackness 2 pinpricks of white light blinked open and shut. Larry pulled the quilt high and watched until dawn. By morning, the corner was empty. The following night, the shape returned. This time, it clung to the ceiling, back pressed against the wall, arms and legs spread wide as if holding itself there like a spider. Its throat rattled with that same broken clicking. The white eyes blinked again, fixed on him. Larry lay frozen, staring up, hardly breathing. When the sun rose, the ceiling was bare. On the third night, the thing came closer. The mattress dipped by Larry's arm, heavy as if something had settled down beside him. He felt the quilt tighten against his body. Breath touched his ear, hollow and damp, while the clicking scraped in his skull. Larry, He stared straight ahead, terrified to turn his head. The wait stayed until the first bird of morning called, and then it lifted in a way no human body could. The fourth night brought silence. No figure in the corner, no dip of the bed. Larry almost believed it was over until the quilt stirred at his feet. A slow rising swell crept under the blankets, working its way towards his chest. He whimpered as the mound climbed higher, pausing by his ribs. The clicking sounded under the covers now, impossibly close. Then, as suddenly as it began, the shape slid back down the bed and was gone. By day, Larry busied himself in his workroom. Rows of jars gleamed on the shelves. Some were spotless and empty, labels already written. Others were sealed with cork and wax. He moved them carefully, arranging, wiping, setting them in order. What they held, no one outside his cottage ever knew. The nights grew worse. The shape never left him, always shifting place, a crouched shadow in the corner, a black weight on the mattress, breath on his neck. It was no dream. It was his companion, and it was drawing closer. After a week, the chimney smoke stopped. When the priest and two neighbours forced open the cottage door, the air inside was foul and still. They searched room by room until they entered the back chamber. There they found the shelves, rows of jars stacked neatly, empty ones cleaned, others with paper slips marked with dates and names, and some were not empty at all. Tiny figures lay curled at the bottom of certain jars, their wings broken, their light faint. Some were only shadows of what they had been, pale and fading. Others were dead outright, their small bodies pressed against the glass. The priest whispered a prayer, his voice trembling. They found Larry Fitzpatrick in his bed. His throat was torn open. His tongue had been dragged out through the wound. His neck was twisted so far back that a bone showed white in the flesh. The quilt was smooth, as if something heavy had lain beside him through the night. And above the bed, 4 deep gouges marked the plaster, spread wide, as if arms and legs had clung to the wall. Neighbours whispered afterward that Larry had brought it on himself. He had trapped the fairy folk in jars, bottled them like insects, robbed them of breath. And for that, the fair folk had sent him a companion. Once chosen, it never leaves. The cottage is empty now, the shelves bare, the bed cold. Breathe easier. Let your shoulders drop. Let your chest grow heavy with the quiet. We'll move on, deeper into the dark, and into the next story that waits ahead. And now the next tale of the night, a tale entitled Night of the Cath She. Ronnie O'Toole had grown used to being alone. He was a thin, sharp-boned lad, no more than 12, with hair the colour of washed straw and a face that always seemed tired, as though the world had already worn him out. His father had died when Ronnie was only 8, carried off by a fever that swept through the village one spring. Some families lost cousins, others uncles, but Ronnie had lost the man he looked up to most. It left a mark on him, not just the grief, but the way the other children treated him after. They whispered as he passed. Sometimes they'd shout, sometimes they'd laugh, and often they chased him for no reason other than cruelty. Ghost boy, they'd call. Your dad's in the bog rattling his chains. He left you 'cause you're not worth keeping. It was Declan who started most of it. Declan was bigger than the rest, thick-necked, with fists like hammers and a face that always carried a smirk. When Declan laughed, the others laughed. When Declan swung, the others followed. He was the leader, and he delighted in making Ronnie's life miserable. Ronnie had grown skilled at slipping down lanes and cutting through hedges, finding shortcuts back to his cottage where his mother still tried to keep food on the table. But no matter how quick he was, there were times they caught him, cornered him, and gave him bruises he had to hide from his mother's eyes. On one hard December evening, when the frost had hardened the roads and the smoke trailed low from the chimneys, Ronnie left the schoolhouse late. The teacher had kept him behind for not finishing his sums. He pulled his coat on tight, though it was thin and patched, and set off down the lane. His breath rose in pale clouds. The sun was sinking, leaving the sky a dull grey. He heard the footsteps first, heavy boots on the road behind, and then came the voices. There he is. Get him, Declan. Ghost boy's running home to cry. Ronnie didn't even turn. He broke into a run, heart thumping, boots clattering against the frozen earth. The shouts followed, then the laughter. Stones clattered against the ditch. He leapt the low wall of a field, cutting across the hard ground, but the older boys were close. Declan's voice rang out, cruel and mocking. Run, Ronnie, run to your dad's grave. Ronnie pushed harder, his chest burning, his thin legs aching. He scrambled over another wall, ducked under branches, and found himself at the edge of the woods. The trees loomed dark, their bare branches clawing at the winter sky. He didn't want to go in there. The woods had stories. People said strange things walked between those trees after dark, but the boys were closing, and there was no other choice. Ronnie slipped into the shadows. The woods were colder, quieter. His boots cracked twigs as he ran, but he tried to keep low, weaving between trunks. Behind him, the others followed, crashing through the undergrowth, their laughter bouncing off the trees. At last, they caught him near a twisted oak. His breath tore at his throat. His legs wouldn't move. Declan shoved him hard, and Ronnie fell onto his knees in the mud. Pathetic, Declan sneered. All bones and no tears. Maybe we should bury you here and let the ghosts keep you. He raised his fists, but before the blow could fall, a sound cut through the night. A growl. It was low and deep, rolling like thunder inside a barrel. The hairs on Ronnie's arms prickled. The laughter of the other boys faltered. From the shadows came 2 green eyes, glowing faintly like lantern glass. They blinked once, then fixed on the group. The growl rose again, longer this time, ending in a ragged snarl. Declan's hand dropped to his side. "What is that?" None of them answered. The shape moved closer, silent but heavy, until at last the firelight from a distant cottage caught its outline. A great black cat, larger than any hound, padded into view. Its fur was ragged, its mane bristled down its neck like smoke. Its claws scraped lines in the frost, and its eyes glowed green, bright and unblinking. Ronnie's stomach turned. He had heard whispers of the cottage, fey cats, guardians of the hills, sometimes protectors, sometimes bringers of death. To see one was to be marked. Declan swallowed, trying to sound brave. It's just a cat. But then came more eyes. 2, 4, 6, green sparks appearing between the trees, circling them, shapes slinking from shadow to shadow. The cottage family. The woods filled with their growl. The bullies stepped back, tripping over roots. One of them whispered, "Saints preserve us." The largest of the cats moved closer. Ronnie could see the scars along its muzzle, the wild tufts of fur, the steam rising from its breath. It stopped before him, lowering its head, and for a moment Ronnie thought it might strike. But then he recognized something. The limp. A scar ran down its leg, the same leg he had seen weeks ago when he had found a creature caught in a hunter's snare. Ronnie had cut the rope that day, heart pounding, and watched the beast limp off into the trees. He hadn't known if it would live. And now it stood before him. The cottage growled low, but its eyes on Ronnie were different, not filled with hate, but with a strange, heavy knowing. The circle tightened around the bullies, and Declan's bravado crumbled. His voice cracked. "Leave us alone." The cats stepped closer, their green eyes flaring, their growls rising. The boys broke. They bolted through the trees, stumbling and screaming, their boats hammering the frozen ground. Their cries echoed until the woods fell quiet again. Ronnie stayed where he was, frozen, his chest heaving. The great cat leaned close, sniffing the air around him, then gave a sound almost like a huff, a sound of recognition. Then it turned, padded back into the shadows, and one by one the glowing eyes vanished until the woods were empty again. Ronnie knelt in the frost, his whole body trembling. For the first time in years he felt no fear of Declan, no shame about his father, no weight of loneliness. Instead, he felt a strange safety, as though he had been claimed, marked by something greater. He rose slowly and stumbled out of the trees. The moon was pale above the fields, the frost glittering like silver. His cottage light glowed faintly in the distance, and he walked toward it, still shaking. That night, as he lay in bed, he heard them again, not close or threatening, but faint, low growls carried on the wind, circling the fields, watching. He smiled into the darkness. From that night on, Declan and his gang never touched him again. They muttered tales of monsters in the woods, but never dared follow Ronnie past the village lane. And Ronnie himself never told the truth. But in his heart, he knew he was watched. He knew he was guarded by green eyes in the dark, the wild, ragged guardians of the cottage. The woods are still again. The frost is quiet. Breathe gently and let the shadows close softly around you. Keep your eyes softened We'll move on soon to another tale waiting in the night. And now for the next tale, a tale entitled Daisy Kilgariff and the Frozen Square. My name is Daisy Kilgariff. I was 9 years old the evening it happened. I had Myra under my arm, a big white goose with feathers always out of place. She was a cross thing, hissing at almost everyone, but she was mine and I carried her everywhere. The rain had cleared, but the streets still shone. I splashed through the puddles, clutching Myra tight, until I came into the white square at O'Connell Street. And that's when I stopped. Everyone else had stopped too, dozens of them, men in coats, women with blankets, children tugging at their mothers' hands, all frozen, not a step and not a breath. At first I thought it was a trick, like a game of statues, but then I looked closer. Their eyes were moving. A man's lashes blinked, slow and heavy. A woman's lips trembled faintly. A boy's cheeks were wet with tears that would not fall. I crept closer. Myra shifted in my arms. When I leaned toward the man, I heard it. A faint sound, a mumble muffled like a voice buried under soil. Please. I nearly dropped her from fright. Then I saw his face crack. A line ran from his temple to his chin, thin as chalk. It widened, and flakes of skin crumbled away. Beneath it I saw raw muscles straining, blood quivering under the flesh. His eyes bulged with terror. I gasped and backed away, but everywhere around me the same thing was happening. Faces splitting, showing blood underneath. Arms stiff as wood, cracking at the elbows, lips twitching, words caught. Their muffled voices rose together, a chorus of pleading. Myra wriggled hard, and I felt the scrape of her collar against my arm, metal against bone, a dull ring in the silence. Then the man's crack quivered, and then slowly it sealed shut. The blood vanished, the skin pulled itself closed, stone-like once more. I stood frozen, heart hammering. All around the people's cracks deepened and shuddered back whenever Myra's collar rang. Faces half open, then sealing, then breaking again. It was as if they were caught in two battles at once, torn apart, then bound again. The air above me thickened, heavy and pressing like a storm without wind. Though I couldn't see them, I felt them. Wings, circling, a crowd gathering overhead. And later, I learned why. You see, Dublin was built on old cairns where the dead had once been laid in stone. The ground still belonged to the fair folk, and that night, two sides of them were at war. Not saints and devils, just powers pulling in the opposite ways. And we, the people of the square, were caught in the middle. The pressure pressed on me, heavy on my chest, trying to pin me still, to harden me into silence. My legs ached, my arms went numb. Then Myra honked loud and sharp. The collar rang clear against her neck. The sound cut through the square like a blade. The cracks sealed faster, faces mended, the mumbles softened. The people looked at me with wide, wild eyes, their tears streaking stone cheek as if begging me to keep a hold of her. The air above The sky blackened, clouds curling like smoke. The unseen war raged harder. I turned and I ran, Myra flapping in my arms, iron collar clinking. I didn't stop until I was home, and I dove into the bed and dragged the blanket over my head and pressed my face into her warm feathers until the dark swallowed me. And when morning came, I walked back to the square, and there they were, the same men, same women, same children, not frozen, not cracking, but walking and calling, carrying bread and pulling carts, speaking as if nothing had happened. But I knew their faces, and sometimes when I passed through again with Myra at my side, I swear I hear it still, faint mumbles under the noise, faint cracks in the air, and wings circling somewhere far above. The square is alive again, the people move, their voices returned, though Daisy remembers. Now, let your breath slow, let your body soften into the quiet, and we'll drift deeper into the night, into the next tale. And the next tale of the night is called Cissy O'Brien and the Cry in the Woods. Cissy O'Brien's world was never sharp. She could see light and shadow, shapes and blurs, but no clear faces. Lamps were halos, trees were smudges, the road was a pale streak. To walk with any confidence, she needed her cane. The stick tapped ahead of her and told her what the ground was doing, stones, roots, steps, or sudden drops where the lane gave way to a ditch. It was winter, and the dark came early. On this evening she had lingered too long at her aunt's cottage. The fire was warm, the talk was kind, and she had not wanted to leave. By the time she pulled her shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside, the sky was bruised purple, and the frost was already settling on the hedges. Her aunt pressed her cane into her hand. "Straight home now, a star," she said, "and mind yourself." Cissy nodded. She knew the way in numbers, 25 steps to the stile, 7 to climb it, 30 more to the stone with the iron ring set into it. She counted as she went, the cane tapping steady on the frozen lane. Her breath rose in pale clouds. The world was quiet except for the crunch of her boots, and then it happened. The cane caught in a loop of briar. She tugged, the stick jerked forward, tore free and slid from her grip. She heard it clatter down into the ditch. Then came the splash as it landed in the water below. Her heart sank. She crouched and reached, but her fingers touched only cold grass and wet earth. She leaned farther, too far. The bank shifted under her weight, and she pulled back quickly, falling to sit hard in the lane. The cane was gone. Without it, every step would be guesswork. She rose, hands stretched in front of her, moving as if the dark had thickened into walls. And that was when she heard it. A sound that was not the wind, not an owl, not any natural cry, a high, thin wail that pierced the air and seemed to curl inside her chest. Not a scream nor whistle, something between the two. The banshee. The cry rose again, longer, sharper, the hairs on her arms lifted, and then came words, soft as breath against her ear. Back this way, Achalín, back to your path. Cissy's knees went weak. The voice was gentle, coaxing like her mother's voice long ago when she was small. She took one step toward it. The straight road lay ahead. The path she always took past the footbridge by the mill raced the quickest way home. Her foot lifted, and then another thing happened. Something small stepped up beside her and slipped a hand into hers. Warm, firm, the size of a child's hands, but it was not a hand like a child's. It was furry, and the fingers were thick and padded, only 3 of them closing tight around her palm. She gasped and tried to pull away. The hand held steady, not hard or cruel, just steady. Not that way, said a voice from low to the ground, calm and patient. Not tonight. The hand tugged gently toward the hawthorn lane, the narrow track that curved around the fields. Cissy had never taken that path before. It was longer, harder. She always stayed with the straight run. Back this way, the banshee whisper coaxed. Come, Cissy, come. Cissy turned her head. Her blurred eyes caught a shape, pale hair floating as if under water, a face white as bone, hovering in the dark. Her breath caught. The small hand gripped tighter. Ignore her. Walk with me. It pulled her into the hawthorn track. The path was rougher. The hedges leaned together overhead and the air grew still. The banshee's cry rose again, behind them now, sharp and stretched. Her name pulled long until it was almost broken. Cissy. The small hand squeezed hers. Keep walking. They moved slowly, step by step. The hand guided her around roots, across stones, through a dip where water had frozen into glassy patches. Once her blurred vision caught a glimpse of her guide, a low shape no higher than her hip, round head, long ears, fur in patches. But when she blinked, the image dissolved into shadow again. Her heart pounded, but the hand was steady. It held her up when she stumbled. It pressed her palm to a tree trunk when she veered off. It guided her with patience. The banshee followed. Sometimes her wail came close, scraping like iron. Sometimes it drifted far, a cry on the wind, always coaxing, always calling her back to the straight road. At last they reached the old ash tree with the iron ring set into its bark. Cissy's fingers brushed the cold metal. She always touched it, though she didn't know why. The hand stopped her there. Listen, it said. So she listened. Far across the fields came the crash of timber and iron, men shouting, a horse screaming in panic, and then silence. What was that? She whispered. The hand did not answer. It tugged her onwards. They reached the footbridge. Frost covered the boards in a white sheen. Cissy stepped carefully. One board shifted under her boot. She gasped. The hand pulled her sideways onto the solid edge where the nails held fast. Here, it said, step here. They crossed safely. On the far bank, the banshee wailed again. Furious now, her cry tore across the hedges, sharp enough to make Cissy flinch. The small hand held firm. Ignore her. Keep going. At last, she saw it, the faint blur of her house ahead, a smear of light against the black. Her sight seemed to clear with every step. The glow sharpened and the walls took shape. At the field gate, the hand let go. Cissy turned. blinking hard to see, and for one brief second she caught it clearly. A grogach, small, no taller than her hip, fur in patches, ears like torn leaves. Its eyes glowed faint, kind, and watchful. A neighbour, it said, a keeper of small paths. Now go home. Then it vanished into the dark. Cissy walked the last stretch alone, her vision cleared with every step. At the door, her brother Eamon was pulling on his coat. "Where were you?" he asked. "I was about to fetch you." Their mother stopped him. "No, you stay. There's trouble on the quarry road. A cart overturned, timber spilled across the bend. Men say if anyone had been on that corner at the wrong moment, they'd have been killed." Eamon went pale. He swallowed hard. "I was going that way," he said slowly. "I'd have been there, but I came to meet you instead." Cissy said nothing. She only held out her hands, still warm from the grogach's grip. That night, laying in her bed, she heard the banshee again. The cry rose and fell, far and near. But she was not afraid. She knew what it had wanted, to pull her back onto her usual path, the path that would have put Eamon at the bend at the wrong moment. By losing her cane, by taking the detour, by following the grogach, fate had shifted. The chain had been broken, and her brother was alive. And from then on, Cissy never took the straight road again. She counted her steps down the hawthorn path. Sometimes she let her hand hang loose, and sometimes, just for a heartbeat, something small and warm slipped into it, steadying her. The banshee's cry is gone now. The lane is still and the night is safe. Breathe slow and let your body soften. We'll move together into the next story. And now let's continue on into the next tale, a story called The Hound on the Hill. Johnny Byrne was 14 and small for his age. He lived with his mam in a cottage outside the village. His dad had died 2 winters back. The only thing of his dad's Johnny kept by his bed was an old bodhrán and a short, worn tipper. The skin was patched, the rim was nicked. It sounded warm when you tapped it right, and Johnny loved it. He played every night in the shed. He practiced the soft roll, the sharp strike, and the lift of the wrist. He listened to the wind in the tin roof and matched it, slow and steady like a heartbeat. Down in the pub, the older players ruled the Friday sessions. Seamus Daly led them on the fiddle, Mick Horgan blew the flute, and Nora Kane worked the concertina like it was breathing. Their father had played before them, and their fathers before that. People said their group could pull a crowd from 3 parishes, but they did not care for Johnny. "Leave the bodhrán to men with hands," Seamus would say, dragging the word wrong on purpose. "The lad can't keep time with the clock," Mick would add. "Sure, he's sweet," Nora might smile, "but this isn't for children." They laughed, and others laughed with them. Johnny smiled back and kept his head down. He walked home and played in the shed until his fingers burned. Johnny had 2 friends who did not laugh. Colm Riley played the uilleann pipes. He was quiet, thin, and careful. He always tuned twice. Nessa Ward had a fiddle with a cracked back and a clear, bright tone. She grinned when she played. She never looked at her bow, she looked at people. The three of them met in the byre. They tried sets the big players wouldn't let them try. They missed notes, then found them. Johnny kept the pulse like a slow drum in a chest. Nessa rode it, and Colm threaded a tune through it like a ribbon. One wet night in March, after a hard session of being ignored, Johnny slipped out to the old hawthorn ring on the hill. People said the fair folk still minded that place. He left a saucer of milk and a bit of bread. He set the bodhrán on his knees and whispered, "I need help," he said, "not to shame them, just to be heard. Give me one tune that's mine, one tune with a bit of truth in it." A breeze moved through the thorns. He could have sworn it answered, but it might have only been the wind. He tapped the rim, a shape came into his hands, a rhythm slow, then quicker, a run that felt like feet on turf, another that felt like hooves. He kept tapping until the lines sat right. He worked on it for weeks. He called it nothing. He didn't want to name it yet, in case it broke. Word went round, the summer fair would be held on the green by Cairn Hill. There would be stalls, bread, ribbons, a small stage, and a wide circle of grass where the great Daly set would play. People would walk up from the river and the quarry road and from the farms. The hill would watch them. Nessa and Colm said, "We should play too." Johnny shook his head. "We'll be laughed off the grass." "And if we are," Nessa said, "it's a short walk home." Colm said, "I'll bring the pipes. I'll stand behind you if they jeer." Johnny looked at them both. He saw he wasn't alone, and it made him brave. They spoke to the fair men. "We'll give you a slot," a man said, shrugging, "after the big set, while they rest their arms." Seamus Daly heard and smiled without kindness. "Let the young ones have their turn," he said loudly. "They can tidy the field with their noise." Johnny heard that too. He said nothing. He went home and played the tune until the shed walls knew it. Fair day came, bright and warm, with clouds moving slow like cattle. Stalls went up, children ran. The Daly group filled the air with reels and jigs, strong and clean. People stamped their feet and called for more. And when they stopped at last, they took mugs and stood in a knot, laughing and glowing with praise. And the field fell to a murmur. Nessa touched Johnny's arm. "Now," she said. They walked to the grass circle. Some people turned to watch. More turned when Colm brought out the pipes. A few smiled, the small smile people wear when they're ready to be kind if they can, cruel if they must. Johnny sat on a low tree stump near the crest of the hill. He set the bodhrán on his knee. He wiped his palms on his trousers. He shut out the faces. He looked down at the skin and the tipper and the rim, and he whispered, "Now." He began with the slow, steady beat. Dum-da-da-dum, dum-da-da-dum. The sound was soft, but it carried. It matched the air in the field. It matched the lift and fall of people's breaths. It sounded like a heart waking. Nessa came in under it, one note drawn out like a line across water, and Colm found a second line and tied it to hers. Johnny only held the pulse. Wind came up the slope. The first cloud of the afternoon moved across the sun. A small shadow fell over the grass. A few people looked up and then looked back down. Johnny's head stayed down, sweat beading under his fringe. He moved from palm tone to rim tap, slow, quick, slow, and back again. The rhythm grew, it never rushed, it had weight. Colum lifted the canter, the pipes cried a bright old cry. Nessa ran a quick turn and landed back on the note like a bird on a gate. The wind rose again. The second cloud slid over the first. The light thinned to silver. Someone in the crowd pointed. Johnny didn't look. He couldn't. He was inside the tune now. His wrist burned, his thumb stung where the tipper bit. He kept the beat, he leaned into it. The clouds above the hill joined and shaped themselves. They didn't become a man the way a picture becomes a man. They became a hint of one, a great shape with shoulders, a long arm, something like a spear in its hand, the line of a hound, low and fast, sketched under the shape's feet. A light moved in the cloud, not a flash that split the sky, but a slow roll, white to blue to pale green, like sea light. It ran down the long arm and along the spear. It flared where the tip would be. People gasped. A child laughed in fear. Seamus Daly set his mug down and stared. Johnny drove the pulse deeper, dum-da-da-dum, dum-da-da-dum. He changed the pattern, 2 on the rim, 1 on the skin, a lift, a slap, and the cloud shape shifted. The long arm swung. The spear sliced a line through the cloud. A second shape rose to meet it, then broke and faded like breath on glass. Nessa's bow shook once. She steadied. Colum's elbows pumped the bellows. The drone held. The cantor sang. People forgot to talk. They stood with their mouths open. Every face was turned to the sky except 3. Johnny's head stayed down. Colum looked at his fingers. Nessa looked at the crowd so she could feed them the tune. Another roll of light ran through the crowds. The spear rose. A dog shape leapt. A third blur. An enemy, a mountain, a wave, fell away before the blow. The light flared white, then violet, then green again, like old glass in a church window. A tall old man at the back crossed himself, then dropped his hand, unsure. Johnny tapped in the count, 4 for the slow, 8 for the march, 16 for the run. He didn't know why those numbers were the ones, only that the tune had told him so. He lifted, he dropped, he rolled the tipper like rain, then struck like hooves. From the hawthorn ring came a small wind that smelled of cut grass and something older than grass. It slid over the field and into the music. Nessa felt her bow pull as if someone had taken the other end. Colum felt the bellows fill too quick and pushed them flat again, grinning in fright. Seamus took 1 step forward without meaning to. The cloud figure grew clearer. Not a face, but a fury where a face would be. A hero's rage and joy, a boy's pride, a man's duty. A spear moved with purpose. The dog leapt his leap. Someone whispered, Cú Chulainn, and the word ran through the crowd in a shiver. Johnny finally heard them looking up. He felt the whole field lean. He kept his head down. He was sweating through his shirt now. His fingers slipped. He adjusted, shifted grip, never losing the beat. He drove the last run out of the skin like he was pulling rope hand over hand. The clouds lowered as if the hill had grown. The winds circled the green. The light rolled in soft bolts that didn't crack, only shone white, blue, and green. washing the shapes, sharpening them, erasing them, drawing them back again. Nessa took the melody up a step. Colum held a drone that buzzed the bones. Johnny laid the final pattern. Heartbeat, gallop, strike. Heartbeat, gallop, strike. Dum-da-da-dum, ra-ta-ta-ta-ta, slap. Dum-da-da-dum, ra-ta-ta-ta-ta, slap. The cloud figure raised the spear for the last time. The dog crouched, the field held its breath. Johnny stopped. One last soft tap. And then silence. The clouds broke apart like they'd been told they could go home. The wind dropped. Sun fell on the grass again like a blessing. The air, which had been humming room, became only air. The crowd didn't cheer at first. They stood still, blinking. A few people cried without knowing why. Then the clapping began, nervous at first, and then strong. A roar rolled up from the green. Johnny lifted his head at last. He looked around like a lad waking from a dream. He saw Colum's white grin. He saw Nessa's wet eyes. He saw the older players standing very quiet. Seamus Daly walked forward on unsteady legs and took off his cap. "We were wrong," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "I was wrong." He held out his bow as if it were a gift, then laughed at himself and set it on his shoulder again. "Keep your drum, lad. Keep your friends. Name that tune, so the hill will remember it." Johnny looked at the bodhrán. He ran a thumb over a nick his dad had made years ago. He looked up at the sky, now ordinary and blue, and he said, "The hound on the hill." The crowd set it back, and the hill which kept such things kept it. After people pressed in, children asked if he had made the clouds himself. A woman touched the rim of the drum like it was a holy thing and pulled her hand away, shy. Colum packed the pipes with shaking hands. Nessa hugged Johnny so fast it was almost a strike. The older group stepped aside in the evening set and let the three of them lead one tune. Johnny chose a gentle polka and kept it playing. He wasn't out to beat anyone. He only wanted to play. When the fair was done and the light was soft, Johnny walked alone up to the hawthorn ring. He set the drum down, he poured milk on the roots and left a heel of bread and said, "Thank you for the loan of the sky." A breeze moved the thorns. It might have been wind. It might have been something else. Either way, it was enough. That night, lying in bed, he heard far thunder with no storm, the kind that sounds like hooves on turf. He smiled into the dark. And in the weeks after, the teasing had stopped, not because the older players feared him, but because they couldn't deny what they'd seen. Now and then Seamus would nod and say, "Give us that hound thing, Johnny." And Johnny would laugh and keep it for when it was needed. He didn't play it often. You don't ask the same favour twice unless you must. He and Colum and Nessa kept meeting in the shed. They worked at new sets. They made mistakes and fixed them. The drum skin darkened where Johnny's hand struck. The rim shone where the tipper wore it smooth. Sometimes, when the air was heavy and the hill was watching, a cloud would drift into a long, lean shape for the length of 2 breaths, and then be only a cloud again. And sometimes, when he brushed his fingers across the rim before a tune, Johnny felt a small shiver run up his arm, like a friendly hand, unseen, setting the time. The fire is low now, and the night is calm. You've heard enough of storms and shadows, and the world outside your window is safe. Let your brow ease, loosen your jaw, and let your chest rise soft and slow, as though the air itself is cradling you. If you've enjoyed tonight's stories, you can always return here. This is your place, your corner of rest, and if you wish, you might leave a quiet trace in the morning, a comment, a like, or a subscribe. But for now, you don't need to do anything at all. Sleep will find you as it always does. So drift now, deeper and deeper into the storm. Good night.